Hello everyone, my name is Ben and welcome to Bluehost Education. In this video we're going to go over the Revolution slider, in particular the settings page. There's a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to be moving kind of quick. So starting from the top, we've got our slider title, we've got our slider alias, which is simply the way that the slider is referred to in the code. We've also got a slider shortcode. That's a way that you can embed a certain slider into a certain page. Luckily, the Revolution slider is actually an element on the Visual Composer on this theme, so you probably won't be using the shortcode very often. But if you do need it, this is where you find it. On the Revolution slider, we've got several source types. We can choose for each slide to come from a specific post, and if so, then you need to click on the different posts that you want, and in the URL for those posts, you'll actually see the ID equals or the page equals, and it'll be a number. You find that number and you separate it by commas, and that's the way that you'll be able to define those specific posts as showing up in your slider. Now, since gallery as a source type doesn't tie the slider to any specific posts or set of posts, you have a little bit more freedom to define what each slide will have as far as an image, a URL, and a few other settings. Consequently, I'm using gallery for this example in the video. When you're editing the layout of your slides, you've got a bunch of options here. You can make the width and height of your slider be fixed, which means that it will not adjust based on the size of your window or what device you're using to view your website. If it's auto-responsive, which is what I recommend, it will adjust according to the size of your window. And you can see that down here are the built-in size adjustments. And you can customize those if you want, if you use custom, and then you can also make it full screen. Down below here, we've also got a few more options. We've got here full screen align, which will actually expand the size of the slider to the corners of the page. Unlimited height will lower the bottom of the slider down to the bottom of the screen or the window. And you can see this is all previewed down here on our layout example. We can also force the slider to be full width, which means the sides of the slider, not necessarily the image, will expand all the way to the left or right. Also note that you may need to do some trial and error of different grid settings. So your grid width and your grid height refer to the height and width of your slider on your page. And you might need to try a few before you get one that feels right. Since there are so many settings on the Revolution slider, you will probably be loath to have to replicate all of those settings on a future slider on a different website. Well, because of the import-export feature, you don't have to. You can export the settings on a slider and import it into another instance of this theme on WordPress. So that means that you can either have all the information on this future slider be overwritten, or you can have all that information be appending what's in that future slider. Now we're moving to the top right-hand corner of the Revolution slider settings page, starting with the general settings. From here on out, I'm not going to talk about every option, but the ones that I feel like are most relevant to you. The delay is how long each slide is going to be visible before it switches to the next one. It's in milliseconds, so 9,000 means 9 seconds. Shuffle mode is just what it sounds like. It means that the slides will show up in random order. Lazy load is something to make it easier for slower internet connections to load up your slider. Stopping the slider is something that you may want to turn on if you don't want your slider to keep looping and looping and looping. Position settings allows you to determine whether you want the slider centered or justified to the left or the right. Under appearance, we've got different shadow types that you can experiment with. You've got a timer line on the top, bottom, or not at all. Touch enabled allows mobile devices to flip between slides simply by touching the left or right hand side of your slider. Navigation type can be changed here, bullet or thumbnails. Navigation style refers to the look of the left and right arrows. You can experiment with some different types here. You can always have the navigation show, you can have it disappear, and you can determine how long it'll be before it disappears. Down here you can determine whether your bullets show up on the center or on the left or the right, whether it's aligned on the bottom, center, or top. And here you can do the same kind of alignment adjustments for the left arrow and the right arrow. Last but not least, we've got thumbnails. We can determine their width and their height. And mobile visibility, we can turn off certain functions on the slider when the screen of this mobile device is going to be smaller than a certain number of pixels. We can turn off the thumbs, we can turn off the slider itself, and certain layers or defined layers can also be turned off when the screen is too small. We can also hide the arrows, the bullets, or the thumbnails. And that is the settings page on the Revolution slider.